In 1985, on the Langley estate in Rochdale, the parents of a family later to be known as Family 1 complained that their council house was haunted. A priest blessed the house and the ghosts disappeared for a while.
There were QCs
in the telling of the Rochdale case, the comments of the key social workers are spoken by an actress. They feared for their present jobs. For the first time, we present their side of the story publicly. The ghosts of Langley Estate came back in 1989, and they came with a vengeance.
We got a referral from school about a 7-year-old boy who was exhibiting some very strange behaviour. There were concerns about him coming to school late, or not being in school a lot of the time, or refusing to go into assemblies, or hiding in cupboards, hiding in tiny little spaces under sink units and places like that. The teachers were getting more and more concerned about this child. In the first interview session, the child started to talk about a ghost in the loft, about Daddy going up into the loft and being taken off, going to parties where there were ghosts. He said that his brothers and sisters sometimes went with him. He talked about cages, about being locked in these cages, about things happening to him which he didn't like, a game called Tig which appeared to involve touching genitals.
In March 1990, the 4 children of Family 1 were removed from their home and their parents were denied access to them. Between April and June, the children named other children of other families on the estate as being present at the ghost parties. Acting on this, police and social workers called on 3 more families.
About 7:29, because we have a digital clock, and we had a load of banging at the front door. And I looked through the people, there was just all loads of heads hanging about 15. They told me they were from social services, so I let them in. And they handed me some papers, just said we're taking the kids. Well, they wouldn't let us give them a drink or a breakfast. They wouldn't let them put clean clothes on them. They just picked up the clothes that they dropped on the floor the night before. See the faces as they was walking out, said, say, "Mum, do something." And you can't.
Well, the kids were talking independently to us about the killing of other children, about killing babies. One boy talked about a lady having a baby in a bubble who he had to kill. He gave a description about the baby coming out of this woman, that it was in a bubble, and he said he had to kill this baby. He put his hands together like this, and he made a stabbing action.
Well, the accusations were that we was sacrificing babies, sacrificing animals, burning people, taking babies off the street, taking animals off the street and just sacrificing them, cutting the throats, things like that, drinking the blood and digging them and burying them somewhere in empty houses and things like that, with chanting and whatever.
I think one of us had read a magazine article on satanic abuse, and that was in passing. We certainly didn't put a tag on what was happening. We knew next to nothing about satanic abuse.
The outcome of the Rochdale affair could have been very different had not a voluntary child protection worker taken a passionate interest in the case. Judy PARRY was appalled to hear that so many children had been removed from their homes. She wanted to know why, and so she contacted the parents.
I came away in a state of shock and decided, scared actually. I got in touch with the people that over the many years that we worked in this field, i.e. senior police officers, people that were aware of what was going on. I asked them, is there any police evidence? I was told no. I felt I was actively encouraged by them to support these parents. I got them together as a team and said, right, you've got to stick together. Found a firm of lawyers that were prepared to take it on board seriously. Oh, it's brisk. It's lovely though, isn't it? Yeah.
Judy PARRY did more than just get lawyers interested in the case. A press injunction prevented any publicity, and she wanted publicity.
My decision to bring the press in was, one, it was the only way to get that injunction changed, because they have the ability and the finance to do that, which they did. 2, I felt that if sufficient members of the media were brought in and it was shown to be of interest to the public, then certain hands would have to be forced to open the issue up and examine it. But with the help of the media, we had that court order amended but we still had the confines of a wardship court order, which meant that I was on a very fine line throughout.
Media interest grew and grew. The national press was chasing us. We were offered a great deal of money to talk to the press. One of the Sundays wanted stories, and they wanted videos of the interviews we'd done with the children. At one stage, £100,000 was mentioned.
The case now went to the High Court. It was heard by Mr. Justice Douglas Brown.
There were QCs involved in this, and they'd come up from London. None of us had had any experience of the hostile atmosphere, the way that people talked to us with utter contempt. The first question they asked one of the social workers was, how have you managed to get to the age of 30 and not had any children?
I think, for example, that they gathered a lot of evidence without looking at it, analysing it objectively. They placed far too much weight on what the children were saying to them without realising that their questioning was highly flawed, in the sense that they were asking questions in an improper form. They were very suggestible questions.
We were trained to do the sorts of interviews that we were doing. There were 50 or more. It would have been impossible not to have asked some leading questions. A young boy had talked about something really awful that he'd been involved with, and he looked up and a colleague had said, that must have been really horrible for you. And in court, they spent a good hour or so saying, how dare you have said that this was horrible for the child because you planted the idea it was horrible in his head. Those were the kind of things that were interpreted as leading.
They had faith in the children, they wanted to help the children, they thought they had been abused severely, and unfortunately never kept an open mind. And the very extraordinary nature of the facts and the allegations in respect of ghosts and drugs and other extraordinary happenings should really have led to much more initial scepticism.
43 other people were prepared to put their professional careers on the line and go up on that witness stand and answer questions from the best legal minds in the country and say, we're frightened for these children.
If the courtroom was an ordeal for the social workers, so it was for the families. One father was very upset by a video of his daughter being interviewed by a social worker.
She was throwing a bit of a tantrum, and she had this doll, and she threw it on the floor and was stamping on it. The social worker said to her, what's up? And the next minute, she went and threw herself into the lap of the social worker and shouted out, I want to go home to my mum and dad.
So she went, does your mum and dad it? Or went, no, because I'd never a hand on me. So we started talking, and then it was my sister's turn. So I went out the room, started crying my eyes out, wondering what was going on. So my sister started.
During the hearing, an expert had been asked to look at the content of the children's disclosures on behalf of the defence. She looked particularly at those made by the first boy of Family 1, disclosures that had triggered off the whole Rochdale affair.
He had already been seen by the educational psychologist because his speech was not understandable out of context. And it was said that he had described all sorts of things about strange people coming to get him and making him fly out of the window and making him spin around and all sorts of things like that. And I thought, how did he actually manage to say that? Knowing what the educational psychologist had said about his level of language. And I didn't see how he could have said it without somebody having said it first and then him saying, yes, that's right, or something of that kind. And when I actually came to look at the transcript, that was absolutely true.
Uniquely for a wardship hearing, Mr. Justice Douglas Brown delivered a large part of his judgment in public, a clear signal of caution to social workers up and down the country. The judge said that social workers had failed to read or act on the Cleveland guidelines. His criticisms were front-page news. Yet again, the press painted a picture of hysterical social workers. For all the furor and all the searching, the ghosts of Rochdale have yet to be accounted for. Were they really just the fevered inventions of children put under too much pressure? Or, as the judge in the Rochdale hearing suggested, had the children just seen too many nasty videos? No charge of child sexual abuse was ever laid in Rochdale. Could it be that the searchers had been looking in the wrong place?
I have a lot of experience of doing play therapy with children, involving symbolic play, involving setting out a world in a sand tray and having little people, which they may identify as themselves or they may not. And one thing that I learned early on is that children may set out something which looks as if it might be symbolic. But if you actually believe that it represents the precise things that happen to that child, then you're in deep water. Because children set out things that are relevant to them, but they may not be the things that have actually happened.
Social workers daily have to cope with a paradox: to retain an icy objectivity towards a child's testimony, and yet sympathy for the child itself. Without proper support, it is an almost impossible task.
We've become more aware that even professionals can become obsessed, and that one must put in place checks and balances in one's own professional life to say, am I getting too interested in this? Am I getting so interested that I'm a bit excited by it, a bit titillated by it? You know, we constantly have to watch ourselves and make sure that amidst all this horror, and it is horror, we are able to look at evidence in a cool and calm way, because otherwise we find ourselves in secondary abuse of children.
In the aftermath of the Rochdale affair, this family was left to pick up the pieces. With her marriage on the rocks, the mother struggled to bring up her 7 traumatized children with minimal support from the local authority. They did little or nothing about the condition of her council house, which decayed from damp and dry rot over 7 long years.
I'd been proven innocent. It was just like everything was going to start over again and we were just going to go back to how we was a family. And that we'd get the kids back and everything would be all normal again, and it's never going to be normal again. But they gave me angry kids back. Kids that didn't understand what had happened to him. Parents didn't understand what had happened to him. And I still, even to this day, I still don't understand why it happened and what for, what was the purpose of it all. Still don't understand it. Why me?
Yeah, but look at them, they're doing really well. No thanks to anyone else, but all thanks to you.
As the Rochdale hearing drew to a close, Satan moved further north, to Orkney, where he would make his most devastating appearance.